Welcome in, everyone. We're here. We're live on stage, on the virtual stage. Happy 2025. Mandy, how was your holiday break?
It was good, Amani. Happy New Year, friend. I miss
Yes.
you.
Yes, I missed you too.
Yeah, my break was great. It was the first part was with Scoot's mom, and the
Hmm.
second part was in Ohio. We traversed to the mean streets of Cleveland, Ohio to be with my family. And we went to a Dolphins Browns game, and it was one of the warmest Browns games I've ever been to. It was beautiful. The sun was beautiful. And then third quarter, it went to normal Cleveland weather. It got cold, it got rainy, and I instantly got sick. So it was, but it was fun. And the Dolphins won, so my husband was happy. And it was my little sister's birthday, Vicky. So shout out
Hmm.
to Vicky. She's a New Year's Eve baby, so she kind of gets the shaft every year after the holidays. So it was nice to spend a happy birthday with you, Victoria. If you're out there, if you're listening, it was nice. We had a gift exchange with my family, and it was nice to be home.
All right.
Yeah.
That
What
sounds
about you?
great.
What did you do? What did you do with your Vegas pals?
I just kept it low key, went to a couple dinners or whatever, and just rested and relaxed, graded papers, finished all that, and just preparing for book launch coming in a couple in next month. So yeah,
It's coming. It's coming, Amani. It's right around the corner.
it
What's
is
the update? I feel like we should be asking you updates weekly now because it's coming in fast and
coming
furious.
fast and furious.
Yeah.
So any minute now, it'll be live on Amazon. Any minute
Okay.
now for single order. Pre-orders, bulk orders are already up. It's on like Barnes and Nobles and all that. I have to send in some last edits to the audiobook version. And then we're just doing promos, sent out notes to lots of people in the book to try to get endorsements and quotes. And I'm trying to figure out my 30-day countdown strategy. So I'm working through that because we're going to do it like, the old school countdowns, whether it be TRL Live or American Bandstand or, Video Soul with
Oh,
Johnny
Amani, that's so
Simpson. So we're doing like a
fun.
countdown to launch the book. So I'm trying to figure out the elements in there, and we'll do like 30 days, so from 30 down to 1. So I'm working on that. What else? That's the book update. It's just like it's here.
Well, I got your email. I got your
Yes.
email to join the exclusive, what did you call the club? It was
Book
really cool.
Army. The Book Army.
Book Army, yes.
Yeah.
But the other thing though, it was, what was the other, there's something else that you wrote in there that I thought was super, super cool. It was
Oh.
about, go through the title and the subtitle again because it was a word in the title, I think.
Oh, so The Quiet Storm, the historical and cultural analysis of the power, passion, and pain of R&B groups.
Yeah, it was the Quiet Storm Troop or something like that.
Oh.
There was some
Movement, the
sort of
Quiet Storm movement,
the
maybe?
Quiet Storm movement.
Yeah.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
such a cool way to do a
Yeah.
pre-launch, right? I
Yeah.
think that,
Yeah.
I think gathering your army, but giving us a name was really cool. I wanted to call that out. So I thought
Yeah.
that was awesome. And it's an honor to be a part of the Quiet Storm Troop.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. Well, we're here and we'll just keep talking about it. We'll keep talking about it. So that was my holiday, and now I got a couple weeks now before the next semester of school starts. So we'll prepare for that. And I think that could be a good segue. I'm gonna let you kind of do your introduction to the guest because I know Susan very well, and I'm gonna kind of add sprinkle in some goodness there. So tell us who we're talking to today.
Wow. We have a really fascinating human. She has lived so many lives. So if you are listening live, you just get your fingers ready for the keyboard to type things in the chat because she's lived so many interesting lives. She's the founder and CEO of Innovation Storytellers. She's lived so many lives from rural Thailand in the 90s to epic keynotes on stages to helping C-level leaders from over 60 countries at companies like GE, Corning, Citi, and AT&T become incredible storytellers who actually go on to change the world, not just through storytelling, but storytelling is the way they started. So it is an honor to bring up Susan Lindner to the stage.
So give
Well,
you the applause.
Yeah.
thank you so much for having me. Wow.
Yes,
I get a sitting O. This is the best kind.
yes,
Yes.
yes. There we go.
Oh, we should all do a sitting. Oh, it's so nice to meet you, Susan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me. This is awesome.
Yes, so it's an honor to have you with us. There's so many questions that we have for you, but maybe I'm curious if you think, let's go back to 2024. And what was your number one highlight? What would be number one in your countdown of top moments of 2024? Oh, I'm gonna use that again.
Mm.
Well, I'm so glad you asked me because I have been in a reflecting process for the last week.
Mm.
I was listening to Mel Robbins, and she said, "Today I'm going to teach you how to do an audit of 2024." So I'll
Mm,
just share with you my process was Mel's process, which is go through every picture in your camera roll since
mm,
January 1st, 2024, and go all the way to December, jot down the highlights, then go through your calendar, go through all the meetings and all the activities you had, and write down those highlights.
Mm.
And so going through that was I closed my biggest deal in 2024 in my work life, in my work history.
Wow.
I took meetings at the prime minister's office in Serbia.
yes.
Um, so got to meet with the chief of staff there and got to work with a lot of cool organizations while in Serbia. And the last thing is I got to spend 3 weeks in Bali. The first time in 22 years, I did not bring my laptop with me on vacation. As an entrepreneur, y'all know this is not an easy thing to do, but I shut it down for 3 whole weeks and it was glorious.
Yeah,
Glorious.
yeah. Okay. So that was good. That was good. She gave us from three
Pretty
to
good year.
one. We're gonna say Bali is the number one highlight. Bali is the number one highlight. We're gonna say that one. Yes, yes.
I
Mhm.
want to I want to ask a question about your shutdown that you gave to yourself because I've done this over the last couple of years and each time I have a different sensation. So, how long did it take you once you shut it down? How long did it take you to actually be present? Like was there a graduated time frame? Was it a couple days or were you instantly present? Like how long did it take you to get to where you could actually be like, "Okay, I'm not working. I'm mentally in it to win it."
Yeah, this was not a cold plunge. This was like, tiptoeing from the shallow end
Yeah.
into the deep end of relaxation.
Yeah.
So I did a workcation thing, which is a commitment I made to myself now in 2025 is do the work you need to do while you're traveling, but then add on time at the end. So I had to go to a professional conference over the course of the year rather than going to the National Speakers Association conference in Denver this year. The altitude kills me anyway.
Mhm.
Um,
Me too.
there was a global speakers conference, and it just so happened to be in Bali. Now, this place was symbolic for me because I had planned to go for my 50th birthday in 2020, but something happened that year. Can't recall exactly what that was. Um, I think I had to wash my hair. Anyway, so I didn't get to go in 2020, but I thought, aha. So I had 4 days of conference. And then so that was kinda workish. And then I slowly moved myself into the, "Well, I'll just say hi and thank you for that beautiful meetup at the conference." And then slowly, put my phone away. Wasn't that it just wasn't my laptop with me, but put my phone away. And
Mm.
I'd say after the frenetic feeling of I have to see every site in Bali, right?
Mm.
Mhm,
Then my productivity of my personal life started to kick in. Got to see all the things, got to do all the things. And then it was like, look at this beautiful pool. It's here for me. I could just relax. So I would say took about a week plus to
Yeah.
detox from the need for gadget.
I love
Mm.
that. And then did you see a difference? Did you take any pictures before or after? Like, did you see any difference in like your muscular features on your face or like you're like your face is all scrunched up at the beginning and then at the end you're all relaxed? Was there a physical difference you felt?
Well, I felt like I returned to 90s me where we didn't have a
Mm.
camera with us anymore.
mhm,
Like we've become so accustomed to a camera being central to this device we call a phone, which is the
Mm.
least used app I have on it,
mhm.
Mhm.
right? So to be the person who was like, should I take a picture? Should I not take a picture? Like to actually think about stopping that all of that nonsense. Like, who am I taking the pictures for? Like, I just
Mm.
wanna tell a story to myself, right? I don't need to be entertaining the throngs. I can just be with myself. The bigger question is, can I just be with me? That's really the work and the joy when you finally get to a point where, like, none of it really matters. I'm just here for myself.
Oh, it's beautiful. I'm so
Mm.
glad you did that.
Me too.
There's so many directions we could take this conversation, but we'll go straight down the first road. And down the first road, I see this word called innovation. And I'm just curious to hear, what is your definition of innovation?
Innovation for me is change that brings value to others. So innovation in and of itself, like creating, going from 6-minute abs to 5-minute abs, nah, not that innovative, right? The greater value. So the greatest innovations are those that provide so much value to the people who use it, right? Ultimately to the people it serves. So innovation has to serve the greater good. That's what I would say.
Okay.
That's the focus of innovation for me. That which creates change that creates value for others.
Okay.
And I appreciate that though, Amani. I know we'll grab your follow up in a second. I know you've got a follow up. I can see it in your eyes. I can see it. I appreciate you. I just want to call something out because I think when people think about innovation, they think about it has to be groundbreaking. It has to be technology. It has to be something different that nobody's thought about before. And I don't think people tend to step back and think about is just a change that brings value. Like I think it's so much less intimidating to hear that innovation equals a change that brings value. Because when people say innovation, sometimes people are like, "Oh, I'm not innovative. That's not me." But really, anybody can bring a change that brings value. I mean, that's what I'm taking away from your definition.
Absolutely. I'm an anthropologist by training, right? So the course of human history and the way that we grow and evolve over time is that us as humans pretty much always together as a group. It's rare that there's one person who discovers fire, right? Like somebody holds the stick, somebody pushes it, like
Mm.
grinds the stick against the other, and suddenly there's fire. It's a rarity that innovation takes place in the mind of a single human, right? That's a stroke of genius. Typically, innovation takes place in groups, and there's lots of input and lots of understanding of where value will come from and why it matters and why we go forward. And so, number one, we all have the capacity to create. We are created by another creator, right? Our moms and dads who came together and created us. And as a result, we all have the capacity for creative endeavor. And so when we decide to put that into a change that brings value for our families, our friends, the people around us, our communities, we're all innovating when we're taking tiny little micro steps forward. So all of us have the capacity for innovation.
Mm.
Well said. Well said. Now, to combine that, based on your experience, like, what are the characteristics and what makes the best storytellers you've ever worked with? What are the attributes that really stand out when it comes to the best storytellers you've ever worked with?
Empathy. Empathy
Oh,
for the person who's listening and for the characters in that story, right? We pretty much have to have a character that we can relate to. We don't have to like them. Like, I don't know that many people who really love Darth Vader, but we have a deep empathy for that creature, right? That individual. And we get to understand why he became that way, right? In the same way that we understand Luke. We have empathy for the missions of both of those characters in the story. And when a storyteller is truly amazing, they're thinking about the benefit to the audience. In the same way the innovator thinks about the benefit to the person who gets to use it, the storyteller thinks about what is this incredible story and how will it land for the listener. So we have empathy for the characters and we have empathy for the audience. And when those two things come together, there's just magic because they spin a yarn and we can't stop leaning in to listen. And that's a beautiful kind of alchemy that happens when we have empathy on both the storytelling side and the listening side. That's when it's great.
empathy. That wasn't a word that I expected, so thank you for surprising me.
I
When you're
zagged
working,
when you thought I would zig. See that?
I love it. That's why you're here. When you're working with all of these different people that are in prominent positions, but you're there to help them be more innovative and tell better stories. What's the common thread? Like, what do normally all of them have to work on or to improve or to get better at storytelling?
Well, that empathy is often one of them, right? Is really
Mhm.
understanding the needs of the listener. So typically, um, a lot of my clients are scientists. They are physicists, chemists, what have you, biologists, But in addition, they are also change makers inside of their organization. So maybe it's the IT team, right, who's trying to create a digital revolution inside of an organization. Or it's a team of leaders who are trying to take what's an American company focused on local manufacturing to now go international, right? They're change makers, they're catalysts within an organization. And sometimes change makers, they're so driven to move something forward that they're not stopping and thinking about who's receiving the message. So most innovators are great at innovating. They are not so great at communicating the value that we talked about, the purpose or the why, and the impact that it's going to have. And I like to call this the best kind of story that an innovator can tell is a goodwill story. And a goodwill story is one that creates benefit to the listener. So every time I want to tell a story, especially in a corporate setting, I first have to ask myself, why am I telling this story? What's my purpose in my innovation? And how will my listener benefit? And if I can even take it one step further, how could my listener become the hero of this story? By funding it, by supporting it, by providing the right resources, allocating the right people, realistic timelines, realistic goals and expectations. How could that person, if we work together, become the hero of the story in bringing the innovation to light? And so most innovators are so caught up in what's happening under the microscope, right? Or even hitting some kind of goals and KPIs, hear that term all the time, that they forget about how they could actually really bring goodwill to the people around them. And so that's a really focal part of the work that I do, is helping folks who are creating breakthroughs to think about how they're actually creating goodwill for the listener of that story.
Like it. Mandy, over to you.
Well, I want to hang here and maybe go a little bit more in the weeds about
Mm.
storytelling. I think people think storytelling is, sometimes people are like, "Oh, I hate the word storytelling." But at the end of the day, we all know storytelling is where it's at. I think people just want to put a different name for it to make them feel better. But I want to go in the weeds with three ways that you talk about stories, that I've seen you talk about stories before. So I want to ask you how you define each of these words and what purpose you think they have in business. So the first one, it's story mining, story crafting, and story sharing.
Mhm.
So, when I go and do workshops or have a keynote at a large conference, people always come up to me after and say, I'd love to tell more stories. I don't know where to start.
Mm.
How do I start in the process? And so, story mining is the beginning of looking for these gems. And that is a term that my friends, Mimi Sherlock and Jean Storley, actually created, of story mining. How do I go and find a story? And the premise around that, if you're looking for a story with both hands and can't find one, like, close your eyes for a minute and just think about the most influential people, places, events, or objects in your life. The people who have influenced you, the places you've been that have shaped you, the events in your life that really were milestones for you, or an object, something discarded, or a treasured heirloom, or something you just found on the street, right? What are those four things? Any one of those four things can be triggers for a great story when you're looking to start. So, if I'm trying to convey to my team, for example, 2025 is going to be the year of resilience. We've had a really tough 2024, and this year we're going to be resilient and bounce back. We're going to respond to change. Well, now I ask myself the question, what person, place, object, or event taught me about resilience? And so it might be, for me, failing my driver's test 3 times,
Oh,
right?
I
Had
failed mine 3 times too, twinsies.
high
Yeah.
five.
High five, yeah.
I passed on my first time.
Of
Anyways,
course you
continue.
did. Of course you
Oh,
did.
so
You gotta fail. Failures are better.
so yeah, so, that is a lesson in resilience, right? And persistence and perseverance, right? Which might be other adjectives that I might want to use with my team as rallying cries. So that's story mining. How do I find a story? People, places, objects, and events. Great 4 places to start if you're looking for a story. Um, story drafting is how we actually write the story, right? How we create a framework of the story that we want to tell. So first up is just like that resilience theme. What is my theme? Right? What do I want to make absolutely positively sure lands with my audience? So even as I think about that, failing my driver's test 3 times, what do I want my listener to walk away with if I told them that story? Maybe part of it was an object. If I knew if I passed my driver's test, I would get the 1988 Ford Fairmont brown exterior, gold interior that my friends referred to as the vomit comet because it was so hideous that I would get that car at the end, right? So maybe part of as I'm drafting the story, I think about what's the incentive my team will get at the end of being resilient. Will they get a bonus, a raise, promotions? What other incentives will be there for them? I can now share the story of, and I got the keys to that most hideous car ever engineered by the Ford Motor Company, right? I now get to tell a story of something even greater that my team will walk away with. So as I'm drafting the story, I always start with the end in mind. And the other question is when I'm sharing it. So that last piece in telling a great story, you have to ask yourself the 4 big questions. So just like we have people, places, objects, and events at the beginning, at the end, we want to ask ourselves before we ever tell the story that we're working on, what do I want my listener to think, i.e., remember from my story? What do I want them to think, to feel, to do, and to say to the next person of consequence when I'm done talking or when they leave the room, let's say? So, what do I want them to remember? Am I using language that's really memorable? Can I use turns of phrase or metaphors that are really helpful, that keep the memory locked in someone's brain so it's easy to repeat? Innovation requires movement and momentum. So I need to pre-plan the story with facts that are easy to remember and easy to repeat. So that's step 1. Step 2 is how do I want them to feel? We're not actually driven by the content of the story. We're driven by the emotion that the story generates, right? Just like when you go to a horror movie and your palms start to sweat and your heart's racing really fast, you're having a physiological response. You're having a feeling to what's on the screen, right? And Amani, you're a music genius. So, like, when you play a particular song or melody, when you're DJing, right? And you can get a whole crowd moving just on an emotion.
Mhm.
Well, we have to take up that mantle of performance to some degree and think about what is the feeling that I want my team to have when they walk out of the room. I get to pre-program that as the storyteller. Do I want them to feel a little bit of fear? Last year was really hard. We lost a couple of really valuable team members. I don't want to see that again. Adrenaline, right? I'm getting people a little bit scared, a little bit nervous. But I know we have an incredible team and we have to fight like hell on the following 3 fronts. And I can just feel the courage and the excitement of this group to get it done. I can inspire them with a little serotonin. And then I can tell them, if we get this done, this impossible task, everyone's going to get a car, just like Oprah said. Right? And now I'm giving them some GABA and some dopamine that makes them go, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. So I get to pre-plan the emotions that I want to generate in my listener. That's the kind of mad scientist chemistry that goes into storytelling. But when I'm clear that my people are feeling what I need them to feel, now I can motivate them to act. Right? So feeling generates the action. So have we then said, this is what I want you to do when I'm done? Do we have a clear call to action? Right? Great corporate story tells people what to do next
Mm.
and actually invites them to ask the question, what can I do? How do I make the story my own? So when I'm telling the story about failing my driver's test, and Mandi, you probably know this feeling, other people go, oh my God, I failed too. Or I didn't fail my driver's test, but I failed, I got a 600 on my SATs or something like that. We immediately come back to that place of failure because we relate. And then we go, what now? Get me to the dopamine, get me to the good stuff, right? And the last is, what do I want them to say? So can I pre-program in my story that repeatable line This is where I ask people to become, the Don Draper, to
Mm.
figure out what the tagline of the story is so that it's repeatable. And the folks who were best at this were the prophets. You know, they knew how to say something like going from an eye for an eye to turn the other cheek,
Hmm.
right? We hold those things inside of us and we're able to repeat them thousands of years later because they resonate within us, and we're able to repeat them. So short, sweet, to the point of what do I want them to repeat to the next person of consequence they talk to?
I love this pickup from this because I think sometimes when people think storytelling, they also think, well, I'm not a professional speaker. I don't need to tell stories. Or I'm not the CEO. I don't need to tell stories. But what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the power of persuasion starts with a good story.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the power of communication that relates to other people starts with a good story. And if you want to communicate with your spouse, with your kids, with the person fixing your car, or with your boss or a customer, it starts with some of these tenets that you're putting together.
I mean, it's how humans fundamentally communicate.
Yeah.
So, and the best storytellers, McKinsey and Company, they put out a list of the top 40 traits that every executive needs to have, and storytelling was among them. And it's
Mm.
because it's that which
Hmm.
brings communities together and has done so since human history began. It's how we've communicated with each other. It is not Excel spreadsheets and 3 bullets. That is not what the wisest people of our human history have done for one another.
Mhm.
It is by not only telling stories, but tell stories that others can share. Right? That's how we create momentum and movement and innovation, right? Most innovators are inspired by someone who came before them.
Yeah.
Frankly, all of us are. We can all point to people in our lives who we've been inspired by who taught us something with a story. And so we're able to recount those stories over and over again. Yeah, it's an intrinsic part of human history and how our human operating system works. So no need to go against it. We can just learn to get better at it. It's like any other muscle in the body. We just
Mhm.
have to work it.
To
Yeah.
practice. Yeah, it's good
Yeah.
stuff.
The
Mm.
songwriter in me wants to ask a follow-up question. I'm curious, what's the most effective way to add pain, heartbreak, and loss into stories?
Mm. We need it. So, what we need to know about story is without friction, without conflict or pain, there is no story, right? If I say, I got an idea, I developed the idea, they produced the idea, and now it's an iPhone. Wow.
Boo. Yeah.
And gotta go. Thanks for that very informative update, but that is a
Yeah.
memo, not a story. Right? So, thinking about including heartbreak is part of the empathy equation. So, we need and want to know how hard it was to make the climb to get to the climax. So, tell us about the pain and the agony because our empathy drips from us with pain. You want to connect people, fear and pain are the two big ones. And take a look at any political campaign. Almost all of them begin with fear and pain,
Yeah.
right? And it's because if we don't have a problem to solve, why are we here? So, thinking about ways to do that, I mean, creatively, Amani, you probably have more tricks up your sleeve than I do. But one is, why should I feel pain and empathy, right? Why should I feel the pain and agony of the character, of the protagonist of the story? What makes that pain reflective of my own, right? That I can empathize with the pain of the subject of the song, the story, the play, what have you. How do I connect to the pain as if it were mine? And maybe it's just helpful to give a little nugget about how storytelling works, like what's happening in the brain. So when I tell a story that's painful, I'm happy to share one with you. Um, I was auditioning for the role of stepmother of the year. I was dating my then spouse and a future spouse, and I decided I was going to put on a movie night. And so I picked out a movie, and I decided to bake some chocolate chip cookies. And the kids were downstairs. They were about 6 and 8 at the time. And I put the warm cookies on a tray with a pitcher of milk and a couple of glasses, and I walked downstairs, and the kids decided to load up the movie before I got there. And I had chosen for that night Bambi. Now, if none of you know the beginning of the story of Bambi, Bambi's mom gets shot in the first scene. Now, I was dating a widower who had lost his wife, and the kids had lost their mom to cancer just 2 years prior. And so as I watched the opening scene unfold and the hunter shoot Bambi's mom, I wanted to die. And I watched my kids' faces just go in agony. And at that moment, I cursed Walt Disney like I have on the inside, like no one had ever cursed a man before. Because I realized that that man, Walt Disney, made the main character of virtually every Disney movie an orphan, or at least had lost one parent. And I thought, oh, he starts the story where the children are the most vulnerable. He has hit on the greatest terror attack of a child's heart, which is taking away one or both parents. And I thought that man has every child right here in the palm of his hand, because he can lead them on any journey now because they are so vulnerable.
And they relate. What kid
Instantly.
can't relate instantly to losing a parent when they're that young?
Right, that terror, right? And so that is a thread through almost every Disney movie. And so you begin to see like, oh, he gets that adrenaline, that fight or flight, fear, freeze from the beginning. And then they're wrapped. And then, Bambi meets his little forest friends and Thumper and all the rest, and they go on their way and they live happily ever after in the forest. But that bang, I will never forget as long as I live. So what's happening in the human brain while we do this, right, is that I'm connecting to a story. While I'm telling you this story, your brain is going back to either seeing Bambi or thinking about another Walt Disney film, and you are latching into that emotion of going, oh, the thought of that, how awful. And you're having an experience while I'm talking. The little filing cabinet in your brain is looking for a matching emotion. So when it lands on that emotion of fear, distress, sorrow, to your point, Amani, in the song, when I know the feeling of sadness that you are describing in a song or in a film or in a story that I'm telling, whoop, the files match, and then you as the listener lean in. So I tell universal stories of these emotions because they click in instantly. And the other is true for memory. So if I asked you, what were the cookies that I was making for my kids?
The chip.
That's right. How many times have you had someone special in your life make you or serve you chocolate chip cookies, and you can take that sensation instantly?
Yeah.
Right? So the five senses also really great triggers in songs and in stories because we're immediately transported there. So if you want to make a story really effective, make it delicious, make it smell like ambrosia, make it feel like a soft blanket, because we all instantly relate. The brain is looking for those sensations in order to connect to the story. That's how we connect. That's how we're forced to act on those feelings.
Yeah.
That's why we stand up in the theater and yell at the screen, "Don't go in the house."
Yes, exactly. Wow. That was I have no follow-up questions there. That's just perfectly said, because music's the same way in terms of nostalgia. And you remember, if I said, "Oh, where were you the first time you heard Biggie Smalls?" You might remember. Where were you the first time you heard Biggie Smalls, Susan?
Oh my, I think I was at a frat party. I think I was dancing with someone too close. I think that might have been it.
Or not close enough. I mean, who knows? Who knows?
That was a segue to let everyone know that Susan is a very big hip hop fan. She's a hip hop head. She knows her hip hop. So respect. Respect. We have come to a nice point in the show where it's time to flip the script and
Okay.
get you to ask both myself and Mandi any question that you want to ask us. Nothing is off limits. So, who do you want to ask the question to first, and what is said question?
Okay, well, I have a question for the both of you, given your
Okay.
backgrounds, that I'm very curious about. So, both of you are meeting planners, right? I mean, Amani, you were president of Meeting Planners International, right? In your chapter, you are both exceptional meeting planners, not to mention speakers, all of this. But I'm curious, what is the scariest thing that has ever happened at an event that you were orchestrating, that you were responsible for, where you're like, how am I going to handle this?
Mm. Mandy, you might have more experience on. I'm thinking of mine.
I have so many stories. Like,
Yeah.
which one? I don't know if I would call any of them scary. I think when you are in a meeting planning situation, everything anything can happen. I think you have that mindset that like anything can happen. So I think most planners instantly go into, okay, how am I going to fix this mode? And some fixing
Mhm.
is harder than others, right? The first thing that I'll just say the first thing that came to mind though was I had a meeting. It was in, I don't want to say the city because I don't want to talk badly about the city, but it was not in a major city. It was like in a third tier city. And their convention center was small. And the keynote, it was 2,000 people. And the keynote speaker just hit the stage. And we were on the stage, and I'm in the tech riser, and I'm in the back of the room. And all of a sudden, the fire alarm starts going off and the smoke it smells like it wasn't like the fire alarm just went off. It was you could smell smoke and then it was the fire alarm went off. And I was with my counterpart, so she worked for the organization directly, and I was like, "Okay, you get everybody out of the building. I'll go find the facility people." So I've got my radio. These are the days where we had a radio. It wasn't like earphones or whatever. And I'm like running through the building. I went down the up escalator. I mean, it was just like one of those frantic moments. I'm going down the up escalator. The escalator then stopped in the middle because that was the fire protocol at the time. And I found a security guard and I asked him, where is the operations manager at this point? He's like, he's with the fire chief. I'm like, take me there. He's like, I can't take you there. I'm like, I will follow you there. So followed me there and I got into it was just this little back office. And I was like, what happened? And he's just like, we don't know. The elevators just started causing a bunch of smoke. So in the meantime, as I'm trying to get to the bottom of this to think, are we ending the meeting? Are we just taking a break? You're trying to figure out, is this a pause or is this thing over? I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. There's still 2,000 people. It takes a long time to get 2,000 people in the parking lot. So there's people scattering. They did a really good job of getting everybody out. And he's like, I don't know what happened, but there's just smoke coming from the elevator. And when we open it and we close it, there's smoke. And I'm like, okay, hang tight. I grew up in the elevator business. My dad was the director of
Mm.
safety
Oh,
he was an elevator mechanic his whole life. And then he went over to the corporate side and he was a director of safety. So if there's anybody that knows what's happening with an elevator without looking at it, it's Dave Kabasic, right?
Oh
So
my
I
God,
call my
Mandy, you're like Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny, like
oh,
talking about like the timer, the timing gauge or whatever.
I have
You're
never seen My Cousin Vinny, but I love Marissa Tomei, and
oh,
I'm
you
gonna
gotta
have to
watch
watch
that.
it now.
That's
I
a
have to watch
classic.
it. I know. I'm not down on all the classics, but thank you. I will write that recommendation down. Anyway, so I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, what would cause an elevator to smoke? Like what without a fire? He's like, oh, when was the last time they had the elevator service? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, every elevator has an annual maintenance program, but once they get installed, it's one of those things that facilities, they never buy. They never tend to buy it until there's an issue and then they overbuy it. He's like, ask them. So I asked him, I'm like, when was the last time you had your maintenance? And they looked at me like stark faces. They were
Yeah.
white faced, like it was like they just seen a ghost. And I was like, okay, you don't have to answer that. But is there not really a fire? This is just a maintenance issue. I'm like, this is a maintenance issue. I'm like, we're going to get everybody back in. And after the keynote speech, we're going to meet right back here in this office and we're going to talk about how you're going to compensate my customer for this because I know you did not renew your maintenance plan. And I know this is why this is calling and this could be a big issue. Anyways, they did. We got everybody back on stage. It was fine. And we ended up getting our value for the keynote, which was awesome. And they ended up doing the right thing. The facility did the right thing and compensated the client for the interruption. Because then you know how it goes. The rest of the day was off like 27 minutes or whatever that was. And that does cost money. And so they did it. But that was the moment where I don't know if it was the scariest, but it was this thing that happened that I was like, oh shit. And then I'm like running down up escalators and I'm like, mafia moment with the elevator construction people in the back room. But it all worked out. It all worked out in the end.
Wow.
Yeah.
What comes to mind for me is for September 11th, I was working 4 blocks from the Pentagon
Wow.
at the Crystal Gateway Marriott. And you had the planes that hit in New York. You had the first plane that hit the Pentagon. So then we were so close that there was smoke coming into the hotel. People were fleeing to our hotel to escape. Then there was no cell phone service. So people were on our computers sending people they loved emails, letting them know they were safe.
Wow.
And we, as I was like a director of national accounts for Marriott, we had to stand in the lobby, not knowing where the fourth plane was. We had to stand in the lobby and direct people to go up to the second floor ballroom for safety. But we had to stay in the lobby because we were responsible for the safety of our guests. So we had no idea where this plane was. We were so close, it could obviously veer off and hit us quite easily. And that was probably the most scariest and just by far number one. That comes to the top of the list right there. So it's a much shorter story, but still you get the gist of it.
Well, I had an experience. I was a publicist and I was a head of PR for an organization that was running a giant poker tournament in the Caribbean.
Oh.
And I'm certainly not the tournament director, but I was in charge of all the publicity and all the press who were there. And as it turned out, one of the players died overnight.
Oh no.
Which people die in places all the time. People, places, objects, events, right? This is a place story of trying to figure out how to not disrupt a tournament of 2,000 poker players and still get this person out of the hotel back to America without disrupting proceedings. And so I feel for every meeting planner on the planet, because you never know what can happen, to your point, Mandi. And suddenly you find yourself responsible for paperwork, bureaucracies, international government transfers of things you never intended. Yes. So just shout out to all the meeting planners around the world. You are doing the Lord's work.
Shout out meeting planners. Yeah. I noticed that on your website, Susan, you have a meeting planners button too. I thought that was smart as a speaker and as somebody that does what you do. I think other people, anybody that is just listening, if you're not watching the scroll, go to innovationstorytellers.com and just go there to follow Susan in general. But if you're wanting to work with more meeting planners and you're wondering an interesting way to do it, I think the button in the calendar appointment that you have at the top, I thought that was a really good way to do that.
I just want to make life easier for meeting planners. I know how hard this job is. So if I can have my headshot, bio, reel, everything ready for them, I'm just like, here's a page just for you. Take whatever you need. I'm here for you. I just want to make it as easy peasy as possible.
That's awesome.
Smart. That's smart. Let's take a little bit of a time travel trip back to Dickinson College as you're just about to graduate. We're gonna meet you. We're gonna meet young Susan back in the coffee shop and give her advice based on everything that you have been through and know now. What advice would you give your younger self, that self that's just about to leave college and take over the world?
Girl. First off, student loans will eventually, it is not a thing that you need to stay up at night worrying about. You're going to be okay. I want to let you know that, girl.
That's a good one.
Second is, everyone's going to tell you, because they did, that getting dual degrees in anthropology and religion, as my father's doctor told him, is a one-way ticket to the poorhouse. Don't believe them. Know that you will use both of those degrees every day of the rest of your life and tout them proudly. And the last thing I would say is, boys will come and go. Don't get fixated. That's what I
Okay.
would say.
This is good advice for everybody. I love that. I love that.
Okay.
Wait,
Well said.
I wanna hang here at the way back machine too, because I think
Yes.
this is a
Yes.
critical part of your story, and I think what's really, really interesting is you did AIDS education in brothels in Southeast Asia.
Didn't we
Back
all, Mandy?
Yeah,
Didn't
who
we all?
didn't?
Who didn't?
Who didn't start their life with this story? But this was in the 90s. So you worked with sex workers, you turned them into entrepreneurs. There's stories of survival. Like, can you just tell us a little bit about this part of your life and how this has informed you since?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part that actually began my innovation storytelling journey. So I wrote my undergraduate thesis on AIDS, prostitution, and tourism in Thailand. That was the
Whew.
focus of my studies. So
Okay.
I wrote about the largest nonprofit organization in Thailand that was helping these women who didn't want to be prostitutes anymore to find a different way. And so I wrote to them faithfully every couple of months and said, "Can I come and work for you?" For 2 years.
Mm.
Then I got a call from a professor, one of my professors at college, my anthropology professor, who said, "Are you still interested in studying Thai?" I said, "I would love to, but I have these student loans. I don't think I can do anything." And she said, "Apply for a scholarship, stupid. There's a program there's a program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they teach Thai." So I did, and I got it. So I quit my job, gave up my apartment in Manhattan, and went to go study Thai for 6 weeks, 10 hours a day. And then while I was there, I met a woman who said, "Why are you studying Thai?" And I said, "I want to go work at the Samakom Patana Pachagwan Let Chum Chun, the Population and Community Development Association." And she said, "I've just been working there for the last year on a Fulbright scholarship.
What?
Why don't we go to the computer center together, because no one has their
Yes.
own computer, people,
Mhm.
Yes.
and we'll write a letter to the chairman from me, and let's see if we can get you in there." I said, "I've been writing for 2 years." She said, "They moved. It's gonna take another 2 for the mail to catch up." I
Mm.
said, "Okay." 8 weeks later, I was in Thailand working there. And that was that. So I started working on all different kinds of projects, but wound up focusing on working with sex workers, the mama-sans, typically women who own the brothels, the sex workers and their customers, doing HIV education with them. And at the time, there were no drugs in Thailand. This was 1994. There were just condoms. And so, getting sex workers to use a condoms 6 to 8 times per night was a challenge. I don't know about any of you, but the thought of having sex 6 to 8 times a night is one thing, right? The thought of using a condom every single time, painful, by the way,
Mm.
but I lived in an area where 1 in 6 sexually active people were HIV positive. So
Wow.
1 in 6 adults at the market, at the bank, at work, this was life. And so it was urgent, urgent. And so storytelling for me began when I realized that the message from the public health department, which was "get AIDS and die," which literally was what it said on the billboards, had to change. And the way that I understood that to change was empathy. What does my listener need to hear in order to feel like the hero of the story so that they will act in a way that saves their life? And so we started asking the question, what would it take for you to become the hero of the story? The mama-san said, "I want to have the reputation as the cleanest, safest brothel in town."
Mhm.
The customer said, "I want to be the protector of my family, of my wife and future children," right? Not passing on HIV to her.
Mhm.
And the sex worker said, "I want to be in control of my own destiny." Well, how does a public health worker help someone who says, "I want to be in control of my own destiny"? It wasn't enough to hand them a condom and hope they used it 8 times a night. We said we had to create a future for them that was going to be better than. And so we help them become entrepreneurs. So we taught them, this girl from the Bronx was teaching them chicken raising, pig raising, duck raising,
Mm.
was teaching them how to, computer skills and secretarial skills and even gem cutting. I was living in the Golden Triangle, so rubies, sapphires, emeralds, they were all local there. So could we teach them to take up a profession that they would stick with? And so that was the shift, is helping them take charge of their own destiny, not feeling like they were a victim of this, sex worker system. And so with that, we saw HIV infection rates drop by about 26.2% in my province. And the
Wow.
program was so effective that it wound up spreading throughout northern Thailand, where most of the HIV was coming from.
Wow. Wow. How did that inform you then for the rest of, the rest of what you do? Obviously, the storytelling and the persistence, that's the way you open it, but
Mm.
what else? What other ways did this inform you?
So, we think about storytelling as being this kind of miraculous, spinning of yarns and the ability to capture people's attention. But we really have to think about those 4 questions. What do I need my listener to think, feel, do, and say when I'm done? Right? Then we can begin to create stories that actually feed into a narrative that matters to the listener. And so my work, after I came back from Thailand, was actually working in Internet 1.0 with startups. So it was all this groundbreaking technology in 1998, of what is the internet? What is the .com revolution? What is all that? So it was my job to help startups explain their breakthrough technology and the future they were envisioning to the press. As a publicist, right, that was my task.
Mm.
So helping them to tell stories and me also telling the stories and pitching reporters and things like that, that was the shift. And the number one question that a reporter had for me was, why should anyone care? Why
Mm.
should my readers care? And then I began to see, the reporter has empathy for his readers. He has to make this viable to them. So I realized I had to assuage the reporter's ego. Let me tell you, you're going to be the hero of the newsroom if you tell this story.
Mm.
All your
Mhm.
colleagues are going to be fascinated that you got to speak to my client, that you got to see this technology before anybody else. I'll give you the exclusive, right? The raise, the promotion, the exclusive. That's what mattered to my listener. But I knew I had to go even one step further. How's it going to matter to the reader? Because guess what? The journalist also wanted to have the most read story of the day, right? So if I get the most clicks on that story,
Yeah.
that reporter gets a raise and a promotion now.
Mhm.
So, it really was an understanding of empathy, of influence, persuasion, like that great story that influenced all of it is, can I do this real empathetic listening? Um, and, in anthropology, it's called appreciative inquiry. So how do I continue to add more and more good to someone if they continue to tell the story, if they continue to spread the story? How do I ask the questions that matter to the listener so that I'll tell a story that they'll go and spread? And that's how great publicity works.
Wow. Fascinating.
That anthropology is happening all the time. It's happening.
Anthropology. Yeah.
Yes.
It wasn't the one-way ticket to the poorhouse, somebody said.
Absolutely
I
not.
just want to say I bought my parents their house after.
There you
That's
go.
how good it
See?
works.
There you
Ah, there
Yeah.
you go.
Yes.
Shalama lama.
What what's the best way that we can support you and support all the work that you're doing?
Well, first of all, I want to tell everyone to keep telling your stories because your individual stories really matter. They matter to so many people. And don't be afraid to share your own personal stories with people, places, objects, and events that matter to your kids, your spouse, the people around you. People want to connect with you personally. And to your point, Amani, about telling the hard stuff, the vulnerability and frankly, even the tragedy is how we connect as humans. So we connect more over tragedy than triumph. So you don't have to be the hero, right? The listener gets to become the hero when you share what's vulnerable in you. So don't hesitate in doing that. What else can you do? You can certainly tune into my podcast. So the Innovation Storytellers show is you can listen to all the top innovators from large companies and large organizations around the world, even a couple of just real breakthrough startups, tell the stories behind the innovation. what are the stories they had to tell in order to get their big idea to the finish line? So if you want to be inspired by great innovators, that's a terrific place to start. And I'd love to connect with all of your followers on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time posting storytelling tips. So you get better and better at storytelling all the time. That's my desire. I know that's why I'm on the planet. That's my mission.
Love it. Well, we just want to say thank you for everything that you currently are doing. It was a pleasure. I didn't even tell the Black NSA story. We'll tell that that'll be round 2, but it's a pleasure meeting you and working with you there. And just this was a masterclass in storytelling. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and keep up the amazing work with. I can't wait to read your book, Amani, and I am proud to be a member of your own Rhythm Nation, your own book army. I'm so proud.
Yes, yes, of course. We'll give you a round of applause. We're going to put you back in the green room really briefly. So once again, thanks to Susan for
Thank you,
appearing on our
Susan. Good to
show.
see
Round of
you.
applause.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Adventures in Business. Don't forget to rate and review our podcast on the platform that you're currently listening it on. And don't forget to share it with your friends and anybody that might be as much of the business nerds as Amani and I are. See you next time for another captivating interview.